happy to be here today with the American Federation of Teachers, with Americans for Tax Fairness, Building Back Together, Climate Action Campaign, Center for American Progress, Climate Power, EDF Action, Hispanic Federation, National Education Association, Patients for Affordable Drugs Now, Protect Our Care, Sierra Club, and so many others to celebrate the historic Inflation Reduction Act. We are yes, that's right, and we're going to get to chant in a second. We are so grateful to people all across the country who have brought us to the cusp of this historic win. The volunteers, the organizers, the advocates, every single one of you across the country for never giving up and never giving in. We are here today because the time to pass the Inflation Reduction Act to provide badly needed and long overdue relief to communities suffering from extreme heat, from drought, from fires, from floods, from pollution, from rising prices is right now. This bill is very much a compromise and it is hard fought. It is also the single biggest thing our country will have ever done to combat the climate crisis. It is the most consequential healthcare legislation since the Affordable Care Act. It will save families money when they need it the most, and it will be paid for by ensuring that billionaire corporations pay a fair share of taxes. So I know we're all excited and we want to raise our voices one more time to make sure this gets done. So this is a 4-part chant. It's a little complicated because there's so much to love in this bill, but I practice with my son, so I think we can do it. So when I say climate, you say action. Climate.
Action.
Climate.
Action.
Climate.
Action.
When I say health, you say care. Health.
Care.
Health.
Care.
Health.
Care.
When I say lower, you say prices. Lower.
Prices.
Lower.
Prices.
Lower.
Prices.
When I say fairer, you say taxes. Fairer.
Taxes.
Fairer.
Taxes.
Fairer.
Taxes.
All right, all together now. Climate.
Action.
Health.
Care.
Lower.
Taxes.
Fairer.
Taxes.
All right, thank you, everybody. And now I am...
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
And now I am so happy to turn it to an incredible champion for all that we hold dear, Senator Tina Smith.
Oh, thank you, Tiernan. Thank you, Tiernan. Thank you to all of my exceptional colleagues here today, and especially thank you to the activists and organizers who have gotten us to this moment. Senate Democrats will take action in the coming days to fight inflation, take action on the climate emergency and energy, make health care more affordable for millions of Americans. My colleagues will tell you more about the power of this legislation to make progress for Americans, but I want to focus briefly on climate and energy. This bill will be the most significant action we have ever taken to fight the climate emergency and to lower energy costs for Americans. It will lead to a 40% reduction in emissions by 2030, only 8 years from now. This bill will save Americans money through lower energy costs. Rewiring America tells us that American families can see an $800 a year reduction in their energy costs. That's every year. This bill will spur investments in the economy, creating millions of great-paying union jobs in manufacturing and clean energy. And this bill will save lives and improve our health by reducing the fossil fuel pollution, which we know most significantly affects poor communities and black and brown communities who live in places that have borne the brunt of fossil fuel pollution. That is justice. Now let me emphasize one last thing. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, Americans earning less than $400,000 a year, small businesses, farmers, they will not pay more in taxes. But if you are a big corporation and you are earning $1 billion a year or more in profits, well, Democrats think that you should be paying taxes too. If secretaries and teachers, firefighters and nurses, Main Street businesses, if they all pay taxes to make our country work, so should big corporations earning billions in profits. This bill accomplishes that too. The Inflation Reduction Act is a big deal. It has the broad support of Americans, and Senate Democrats are going to get it done, even if not a single Republican votes with it. So thank you so much for being here to support this incredible legislation.
Beautiful.
Yay. And now, Senator Schatz.
Aloha, everybody. Pretty good. All right, that's fine. I just have a couple of quick points to make about this bill from a climate perspective. There's no doubt this would be the biggest climate action that the federal government has ever taken. There's no doubt about that. And that this will be a victory for the planet, and it will be a victory for people across the country. But I want to call out the people who made us do it. And those are the young people across the country who organized a new environmental movement that demanded action, and demanded action on the scale that is necessary to address this crisis. And so, as they say, victory has a lot of parents, thousands of parents. We are not there yet. We do not have a victory yet. But if we win, there will be lots and lots of people to praise. And a lot of them will be right here. But in my view, if we succeed, it will be because there is a young generation that is demanding action, and they deserve all of the credit. It is my great pleasure to introduce someone, the chair of the Finance Committee.
Chuck's here.
Well, it's even better. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, climate champion.
Did I just get promoted to become chair of the finance? Thank you. I've been waiting for that job.
Chuck Schumer, climate champion.
Thank you, Brian Schatz. One day he might become chairman of he is chairman of something already.
Yeah, but wait, I'm ahead of him on the Finance Committee.
You're next.
I'm next.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody who's here. LCV, Protect Our Care, AFT, Center for American Progress. We've had a great alliance here. People who know we have to make this country a better place for working people. People who know we have to fight inflation. People who know we have to fight global warming. And they have united here today. United here today, and we so appreciate it. Look, we're getting closer and closer to enacting historic legislation to fight climate change. For many years in Washington politicians have promised to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing our nation, only to fall short. But with the Inflation Reduction Act, Senate Democrats are delivering on historic climate change legislation. We're delivering on lower prices on prescription drugs. We're delivering on tax fairness, and we're delivering on jobs.
Yes.
This is the biggest. This is a very, 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 very big deal. With this bill, we're going to put the country on track to meet the climate goals we need to preserve for our planet, for our children, our grandchildren. Now, cutting emissions is not just about protecting the planet's health. It's about protecting our kids' health, too. It's about creating millions of new good-paying jobs for people who haven't had that opportunity. It's about health care. 100,000 kids will not get asthma every year when this bill passes, and we know how they have struggled, particularly in poorer communities and communities of color. So it's a great thing. Well, see, I predicted what my notes would say. Okay, put simply, this legislation saves lives, reduces costs, creates jobs, reduces inflation. And the American people are totally on our side. A recent Navigator poll, that's a very esteemed polling organization, shows 65% of Americans approve our plan to lower drug prices, keep premiums low, and invest in clean energy. A Morning Consult poll found even more. 70% of Americans support letting Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices. And another group, Data for Progress, found the Inflation Reduction Act had a net approval rating of 51 points, including large numbers of Republican voters who support this legislation. They haven't gotten their message to their Senate colleagues, but the people will. The people will. It's not hard to understand why so many Americans feel this way. Democrats are delivering for them. We're prioritizing the middle class, working families, people struggling to get to the middle class, instead of what Republicans seem to always do when they have the majority, help those at the very top. This is what the Inflation Reduction Act is at its core. It's what the country wants. It's what the country needs. And it's what Democrats will deliver on in the next few days. Are we going to keep fighting till we get the job done?
Yeah.
We're going to win. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Beautiful. Great job.
And as they say in Brooklyn, back to white.
I'm going to keep this real simple and tell you this afternoon is about people beating power. And I'm looking out at everybody who's outside and sweating and deeply believes we need to do something about climate like we're doing for the first time. Incentives to reduce carbon emissions. First time ever, Big Pharma had to take it on the chin because we were going to say, we're going to compete. We're going to have some markets to hold down the prices. And you want to know about tax policy? Here's the way it works for Big Pharma. They do their manufacturing overseas, they get their profits here, and they put their taxes somewhere else. So for our climate bill and for our health bill, the way we decide on our priorities is we're siding with all of you who've been pushing to reduce carbon emissions, making health care more affordable, having a fairer tax system. You know who's against us today? There are a whole bunch of executives and lobbyists inside in their air-conditioned offices. I'm serious. The people here who want to do something about carbon emissions and holding down health care costs and a fairer tax code, they're out here because we believe in grassroots. The people who want business as usual are up in their offices, and they're still drafting big commercials, and they're going to have emails, and they're going to have texts and algorithms and the like. But we're here for one reason. We believe in you. We think that people count more than power. And the grassroots counts more than the air-conditioned offices. Stay with us. In 3 days, we're going to show your side is winning, and finally grassroots is prevailing over the powerful. Thanks, everybody.
I think I'm up next on the list here. So, hi, I'm Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, where we make things and grow things, and we're going to do it cleaner with this bill. Let me just say that corporate price gouging has been taking a big chunk out of Americans' pockets for a long time. But what we're doing right now, while Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are standing with Big Pharma to protect their profits, we're standing with the American people to bring down the cost of their medicine. When they're standing with the big oil companies to be able to protect their profits, we're standing with people, with all of you, to bring down energy costs and to be able to tackle the climate crisis. And we're standing with folks who want to reduce the deficit while making sure that every single corporation pays a little something as part of America, pays something towards the greatness of our country, like every other American is paying their taxes. And the great thing is that we're going to be able to create millions of jobs while we're doing that. I have to say, I am very excited about all of the bill, but when we look at the climate provisions and we see that in a state like mine that makes things and grows things, with the clean energy manufacturing credits like my battery production credit and 48C and other provisions, we're going to make things cleaner while reducing emissions that are absolutely critical to do. And then the other side, on growing things, we're giving our farmers now the capacity, the tools to aggressively address keeping carbon in the ground, stopping methane emissions, and keeping our forests healthy and strong in reducing emissions with sustainable forestry. So, as President Biden might say, this is a big freaking deal. That's not how he
That's
said
not
it.
how he would say it. Okay, we may have a, but you know what I'm getting at here. I mean, this is a big deal. Every one of my colleagues have played a critical role in all of this, and we're going to get this done. So thank you. I'm now going to turn it over. On the list it says Senator Casey, but I'm not sure if Senator Casey. Senator Casey. All right.
Senator Stabenow.
All right.
Good to see you, Debbie.
Hey.
Thanks.
Oh, all
Let's hear it for Senator Stabenow. We were told we have 1 minute, so here goes. This is the lightning round. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to echo what Senator Schatz said about the folks behind us representing so many Americans, young and old, who have made climate change such a priority all these years. We would not be standing here today on the verge of passing major legislation which will lower the cost of prescription drugs and help so many millions of seniors, lower the cost of energy for our families, and literally in the same bill, reduce the threat of climate change while reducing the deficit, all in the same bill. This bill does so much more that we don't have time to summarize. I want to highlight what it does on health care, of course, what we do to make sure that those ACA subsidies are in place for our families, what this bill does to preserve, and this doesn't get a lot of attention, but in my state, Pennsylvania, it does a lot for those families who have a relative who worked in a coal mine. The Black Lung Trust Fund will be solvent because of this legislation to help those workers. And finally, let me say this. I think it's a good time to ask a question of both parties. What did you do when you had the majority? What did you do with your majority? We know what they did. They used their majority and the president who was in power at the time to pass a tax bill that would further rig the code for big companies all across the world and also for very wealthy Americans. They rigged an already rigged tax code and did nothing for the middle class and for workers. What have we done with our majority? We passed a rescue plan that helped tens of millions of families with a child tax credit. We got to help to get our schools open. We helped to get vaccines out there. And in this bill, we're going to be able to push back on climate change, lower the cost of prescription drugs, make tax changes that bring more fairness, and get the deficit down. There is no question which party has been on the side of families and lifting them up, and what party has been on the side of corporations. I am grateful for the work that's been done up to this point. We still have a hell of a lot of work to do. We're going to get this done. God bless you.
Okay.
And now we have Senator Klobuchar.
Excellent. Well, for the young people up here, this is a great lesson in government. Never give up. I think so many people had counted us out on this bill. Maybe a few members of the media. I don't know. But we stuck with it. Why? Because we had constituents, we had people in our country that said, be on our side. And we did it. As the forest fires are burning in Alex's home state of California, as we see record temperatures all over the U.S., including in my home state of Minnesota, we moved, and we're going to bring greenhouse gases down 40% by the year 2030. That is number one. Number two, and this is something so near and dear to my heart, I've been working on this since I got to the Senate, did one of the first bills out there, and that is to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. And every night when I go home and I watch the TV, have you guys seen the pharma ads? They're running those ads to the very end. And it is the same companies that put in place into law 20 years ago a provision that banned Medicare from negotiating less expensive drugs for the people of America. Banned them out flat. Well, the VA, and we want to help our veterans, we're so glad they got this deal. We're able to negotiate, not for the 46 million seniors of this country. Right into law, they got it, and they're fighting till the very end. Well, guess who else is fighting? We are fighting, and we're not going to give up. So now when I watch those ads, I just go, have fun. Because we are united on bringing down the cost of prescription drugs with major blockbuster drugs right at the start. It's finally going to be lifted, the ban. That, bringing down inflation, $300 billion in debt reduction. I can't wait for not only to go home and show our constituent what we did, I can't wait to see the Republicans go home and explain why they are on the wrong side on reproductive freedom, why they are on the wrong side on climate change, why they are on the wrong side on costs for families like pharmaceuticals, and why they delayed the burn pit bill from getting passed. All of that, there's accountability in politics like we just saw in Kansas. And we are delivering. With that, I am happy to turn the podium over to someone who has been in Congress for decades, but my favorite story was once after being in the House for, 20-some years, was still introduced at a dinner as a young rising star, Mr. Ed Markey.
Thank you so much. I thank you, Senator Klobuchar. The way to fight climate change is you have to be a young rising star because you have to do this for a long, long time. And why? Because the Republican Party is not going to give us a single vote on this bill. And why is that? Because GOP stands for Gas and Oil Party. GOP stands for Gang of Polluters. And so, yes, they blocked Waxman-Markey back in 2010. And yes, I would want more in this bill, but this bill has what we need on climate change. It's going to unleash a revolution. We are going to move from this great movement that young people especially created in our country to the momentum which they created to this moment where a bill is about to be debated on the floor of the United States Senate. And what will that bill do? It will reduce greenhouse gases by 40% by the year 2030. It will create 9 million new jobs. And very importantly, it will spend $60 billion on climate justice for black, brown, indigenous communities all across this country who have for too long been the victims of our fossil fuel era in our nation. That is the point at which we are at right now, where finally we can have justice, justice that is environmental, justice that is racial, justice that is health, and all of it is in this one bill. It's an historic moment. And who will pay for it? ExxonMobil last year paid 3% on their revenues. Chevron paid 2% on their revenues. After this bill passed, they're going to pay for the climate solutions. They created them, they're going to pay for them. And we're going to get the revenues in order to make sure that that is what we are doing. And now let me introduce the great chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. Now let me introduce the great senator from the state of Connecticut, Dick Blumenthal. Welcome, Dick.
Not a chairman, but a great admirer and fan of Ed Markey from our neighboring state of Massachusetts. Thank you so much, Ed. You know, I know a few of you are sweating. I'll tell you who's really sweating. The Republicans in that building are sweating. They are sweating because they are the wrong side of history, but more to their concern, they're on the wrong side of the politics of this issue. The American people want us to fight climate change. They want us to bring down the cost of pharmaceutical drugs and health care. They want fairness in taxes, so the biggest corporations have to pay something on those gargantuan profits, and the tax avoiders and evaders are pursued by prosecutors. I used to be a prosecutor. I will tell you, tax evasion and avoidance is rampant. And that's unfair to the guy sitting at his kitchen table right now, trying to figure out what and how he's going to pay his taxes when the board chairman of those big corporations making hundreds of millions of dollars, they're paying nothing. Those corporations are avoiding and evading 15% minimum tax, enforce the tax laws. Absolute common sense. Let's go for fairness in our tax code and in enforcement of the tax code. Now, Republicans are sweating also because any one of these provisions, taken alone, would be historic. Fighting climate change, historic. Fairness in taxes, historic. Bringing down the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, cutting those prices that you pay for essential medicine, historic. And I want to thank all the groups that are here. You stuck by us. You stuck by us, and you're sticking by us. Thanks to the unions. Yes, organized labor. Thank you. Thanks to all the groups, Climate Action, League of Conservation. Well, you know, I could go through the list. Every one of you. Thank you. Thanks for the advocates and the activists who are out there right now mobilizing support. We need it. We need that grassroots groundswell of support. The American people will speak. Republicans aren't hearing them now, but they'll hear them in November, because climate change, tax fairness, and pharmaceutical drug cost cutting are going to be on the ballot. Not a single Republican vote. Speaks volumes. And I just want to thank all of my colleagues on our side who are standing and sticking with us. It makes all the difference in the world. And now I'm very, very honored to introduce, on behalf of one of the smaller states, but one of the bigger states and a big man in the United States Senate, my great friend, Alex Padilla.
Thank you. Not the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee either, but proud member, helping move these initiatives forward. It is so great to be here today with so many of my Senate colleagues, not just one of us, not just two of us, not just three of us. There's a lot of us. And of course, the dedicated advocates from across the country that are keeping up the fight until we pass the Inflation Reduction Act. We will get it done. And there's a reason that Senate Democrats are working so hard, fighting so hard to advance this historic bill, because as you've heard, it will reduce inflation. It will reduce costs for families. It means bold action against the climate crisis. And consider this, the Inflation Reduction Act will reduce carbon emissions by 40% in the next 8 years. That's a huge deal. But wait, there's more. It gets even better. For folks wondering if we can afford this big investment, well, we can't afford not to invest in this, number one. But number two, it is fully paid for. It's paid for by making wealthy corporations pay more of their fair share in taxes. And we will reduce the deficit. A win-win-win-win-win, if you ask me. Now, as you introduced me, Dick, it was, yes, my home state of California. It's a larger state, and sadly, on the front lines when it comes to the climate crisis. We're facing the harsh realities of climate change in California in so many ways, including most recently, yet another biggest wildfire of the year. You see, wildfire season isn't just a couple of months anymore. Wildfire season in California and in many places across the West is increasingly long and increasingly devastating. And it's not just the number of acres that might be burned in any given year. It's the extreme heat that is exacerbated, the air quality that makes our children suffer, keeps them from playing outside sometimes, and the pollution dangers that impacts everybody's health. And it's not just California, and it's not just the West. You think the floods in Kentucky this week are any coincidence? It's not just that the weather's changing, the climate is changing, and we need to act. The Inflation Reduction Act includes provisions that will invest over $369 billion in bold climate action. Action that cannot wait, because we need to leave our planet healthier for future generations. Young activists get that. Finally, the United States Senate gets it and is going to act on it. The climate investments I'm eager to vote on. Helping reduce air pollution at ports. Helping accelerate clean energy research and development. Supporting fire-resilient forests. And advancing environmental justice by providing billions in funding directly to the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by pollution. this is a unique and urgent opportunity to pass the largest climate and environmental justice package ever, making significant strides in lowering healthcare costs and energy costs for Americans while reducing the deficit. And with that, let me now introduce a colleague from another pretty good size. Let me introduce
Very good state.
from a very good state, not just my colleague, but my sister Tammy Baldwin.
Oh, thank you. All right. And then we're going to go in alphabetical order after that. No, there's so much that has been said by my colleagues. To be on the verge of passing into law a measure that will reduce our carbon emissions by 40% in 8 years is amazing and historic. To be able to keep down prices for health plans purchased through the Affordable Care Act marketplace is so important at this pandemic time. But I want to just focus in on this incredibly important provision that we have been fighting for so long, and that is now permitting Medicare to negotiate with the big pharmaceutical companies for lower prices. We know that that is how we have gotten reduced prices in every other industrialized country in the world. And we know that it works. I want to give an example of some years ago when we had the anthrax attacks. Cipro, made by Bayer Corporation, was the drug used to treat anthrax exposure. And it wasn't Medicare that was negotiating, but instead the Department of Health and Human Services, through another program, was negotiating with Bayer. At the time, one Cipro pill probably cost $4. But you say, what if I buy it in bulk? What if I buy 1 million Cipro tablets? Oh, the price comes down to under $1. What if I get 5 million Cipro doses? It comes to pennies. That's the difference it will make when we start negotiating with the big pharmaceutical companies on behalf of not just people on Medicare, but it will have a ripple effect for all. I talk every day with constituents who cannot afford to fill their prescriptions, who choose between putting a meal on the table for their family or refilling a prescription. They cut their pills in half. They take enormous risks because they have no other choice. This will save lives and lower costs. And we should be so proud to get this across the finish line in a matter of days? Yes. I next want to bring up Michael Bennett, Senator from the great state of Colorado.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here with my colleagues, and thank you so much for the advocates who are here and the people that have been here year after year after year, month after month after month, leading this fight. I can't tell you how grateful I am. You know, just a few days ago, it seems hard to believe, my heart was literally broken by hearing that this bill wasn't going to go forward. And when I think about my state and the ravages of climate change in Colorado, a state where half the water that we need is in the Colorado River today, a state where we had the 3 worst fires in our state's history 2 years ago. Last year we didn't really have a fire for most of the year. We had a lot of smoke that came from California, and there was day after day after day when we couldn't see the mountains, when people couldn't go outside for health reasons. And then we did have a fire on the last day of the year, the day before New Year's Eve, when more than 1,000 families in Boulder County lost their homes on New Year's Eve. And they were smoldering ruins that night, and the next day it actually snowed. Nothing would have happened had it been one day before. And when I called my daughters, who are 22, 21, and 17, and said to them we were going to fail again on climate change, they didn't know what to think. They could scarcely believe that that's what we were going to do. And I thought, this place is even broken beyond the measure that I thought it was broken. And a week later, now we are in a position to pass the most important climate legislation that's ever been passed in the history of our country. We're in the position to be able to have the United States lead all other nations in the world in terms of what we're doing on climate change. I'm not going to go through the provisions because other people have, except to mention a couple of things that haven't been mentioned by other people. The conservation dollars that are in here for farmers and ranchers, the forestry money that is not as much as I would have wanted, but it's billions of dollars that are in here for our to preserve our watersheds and our national forests. The money that's here to support local rural communities and rural co-ops in their transition, all of that is good news for the American West, and all of that is good news for climate change legislation. People sometimes said to me in places where I often don't get more than 25 or 30% of the vote, sometimes it's a little less than that, what does climate change legislation look like? Now I have an answer. This is what it looks like. It looks like a bill that's going to reduce your prices. It looks like a bill that's going to be important to transferring our economy in a way that actually makes sense and is rational and is believable to the American people. It gives us the chance to continue to support Europe in the fight against Ukraine. I mean, there is almost nothing in this bill not to like. And finally, after 50 years of trickle-down economics, we're able to summon the courage to raise taxes on some of the wealthiest people in America and some of the largest corporations that are paying 1.2% or 1.4%. I saw the other day that Amazon was paying 6%. It seems to me they should fire their CFO because they're not getting the rate that all these other people are getting. So this is a good bill for the country, and I look forward to passing it this week. With that, let me turn it over this weekend, I meant to say. Turn it over to my friend, an incredible leader on this issue and on so many other issues, Chris Koontz from the great state of Delaware.
Oh, what a great wet hug that was. Ladies and gentlemen, did you just feel the breeze that wafted through this swamp? I have a simple message for you. It's a message born on that breeze, and it's a message born of the hard work and the determination and the patience of all of you and this incredible group of advocates. Could you please give them a round of applause for enduring 96-degree heat, for holding up not just their signs, not just their message, but their passion and their commitment. The message of that breeze that just came through in this sweltering heat was simple. Relief is on its way. And with this bill, this weekend, we at last, in the Democratic majority in the United States Senate, have a chance to bring relief. Is your family struggling with health care costs? Are you afraid there's going to be a cliff this fall when the ACA subsidies run out for 14 million American families? Dealing with health care costs, relief is on the way. Are you paying too much for prescription drugs? Is your mom or your grandma, is a member of your family, a sibling, paying tens of thousands of dollars with a $2,000 out-of-pocket cap with prescription drug price negotiation? When we pass this bill, relief is on the way. If you're worried about inflation, as the name suggests, with $300 billion paying down our deficit and fighting inflation, if inflation is eating away at your family's balance sheet, relief is on the way. But the thing that moves me and moves Michael and moves so many of the advocates here is also bringing some relief to the sweltering heat here today, to the tornadoes and the wildfires, to the challenges and the natural disasters all over our planet. Year after year, we have tried and not delivered big results. With this bill, $370 billion in investments in every imaginable new clean technology, in transitions to a new economy, in the creation of new job opportunities, $60 billion for environmental justice, for neighborhoods and communities that have asked for decades, when will there be relief? From the particles in the air, from the pollution in the ground, from the ways in which our ability to sustain ourselves and to grow our own food is eking away from us. Relief is on its way. This is a landmark investment. This is a transformational bill of real significance, something we can tell our kids and our grandchildren about that move the needle. Over the next 8 years, a 40% reduction in emissions. I didn't think this day would come. And I'll tell you, I am excited about the backup on President Biden's desk, about the pile of bills he's going to have to sign. We just passed the biggest veterans health bill in my lifetime. We just ratified the NATO accession treaty. He just scheduled a bill signing for Tuesday for the CHIPS and Science bill that will help with manufacturing. But when we send this bill to President Biden's desk for the most important bill signing of his presidency to date, we can all hold hands and look at the future and enjoy the brief, refreshing breeze and say, at long, long last, relief is on its way. So, folks, please welcome, I think in an audible, I am welcoming not Randy, but Senator Carper of my home state. Is that correct? I think we're going to transition to someone who has been fighting her entire life to provide opportunity, to provide access to quality education, to stand tall, even when she some days comes up short. She fights with the greatest of them for educational equity and for the men and women of America's schools. Randy Weingarten of the AFT. Ladies and gentlemen.
I love getting an audible from Senator Koontz. All right, so you say she's from the teachers union. She's a teacher. Where's the education pieces here? Where's the education pieces here? Climate change. If we actually stop these extreme weather events, look at what's happening in Kentucky right now. Look at what's happening in California right now. We then give a future to our kids. If we actually make sure that drugs like this, somebody asked me, why am I still wearing my jacket? Because I always wear my jacket because I always have my asthma medication. If we can actually negotiate Medicare drug prices, we can make sure that anybody who has asthma gets that medication fairly and easily and drop the costs. Same in terms of other health care. And then on taxes. Really, shouldn't regular folks pay less of a rate of taxes than gazillionaires? So, I'm a teacher. So, climate action and health care and lower prices and fairer taxes, A and B and C and D equal exemplary. And for extra credit, there's good jobs out of here too. So lowering home energy costs, dealing with extreme weather, lowering the price of goods, the price of prescriptions, dealing with inflation. This is an amazing bill for workers everywhere, and that is why our union is just fighting to get it past the finish line. And the last thing I'll say is this. I'm also a civics teacher. None of this is easy. We don't have magic wands. We have these amazing senators and activists who fight like you know what to get to the things, to solve the issues that keep people up at night. This is a bill that's going to solve the issues that keep people up at night. Thank you very much. And with that, let me introduce my partner over here. We wrote an op-ed together a while ago, Ramon Cruz from the Sierra Club. Thank you, Ramon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Randy. Thanks for the passion. Thanks for all the work that you do. It's really remarkable that here you have, when in history do you have environmentalists, labor unions, healthcare, everybody, it's behind this. So it's really remarkable. Thanks a lot for staying here under this heat. I really appreciate our future, really appreciate it. So, I would say, I will start by remembering the Kyoto Protocol, McCain-Lieberman, Waxman-Markey, Build Back Better, all names that are very familiar for all of us that have been working on this for many years. You know, for more than 25 years, we have come so close to taking action on climate. And those efforts, you know, have fallen short. You know, imagine how the world would be, what kind of world we would be living in if any of these would have been successful, no? But today, I'm filled with hope that fortunes have changed. With the help of the senators that are here today and every other Democrat in the Senate, we'll get this done. And this cannot come a moment too soon. You know, hours after this deal was announced, Eastern Kentucky and Southwest Virginia were flooded. And in days prior and since, communities across the country have grappled with the climate crisis. And this crisis is in our, on our doorsteps. It's blown the doors clear off, and we must take action now. So the legislation the Senate is now considering is nothing short of a game changer. You know, it puts the country on a pathway to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by the end of the decade. And one of the most critical parts of this legislation is that it will invest in the communities that have been affected, that have carried the weight of this crisis. So it is very important that, that we pass this legislation, and that when this bill is signed into law, these leaders would have passed the largest investment in clean energy, in environmental justice, in climate action in the American history. So that's what I call climate champions, all these senators. And so I would say we're not there yet. So I remain very hopeful that this job gets done. And more than that, I'm determined to make it a reality. So with the Senate Democrat leadership, after 25 years of waiting, 25 years of coming close, we will deliver. So let's get it done. Thank you very much. And now I will introduce Leslie Duck from, sorry.
Senator Tom Carper, the
Yep.
chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee.
Thank you so much. A champion of justice. Thanks so much for your leadership, Senator.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please remain standing. How many have ever given a speech standing on the floor of the United States Senate? Raise your hand. And Chris, who's I think just left, Tim Kane. We get to do it quite a bit here lately. And I spoke earlier today trying to protect something called NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. And you know who signed it into law? Richard Nixon. And you know who was trying to take it down? Our Republican colleagues. And as they would come onto the floor to vote on the measure, I would say the Republicans vote with Nixon. And they would say, well, I plan to. And I say, he would vote with the Democrats. He would vote with the Democrats on this. And I watched the page. We have these pages in the Senate, and they sit at the front, right around the presiding officer up there. And I spoke the other day about what's going on in the world with respect to climate change, climate crisis. And sometimes the pages will sit up there and they'll talk to one another, whisper, and not really pay much attention to what's going on. There's about 25 of them, not a word, like focused right on me, every word that I said. And you know why? Because this is about their lives. This is about whether or not they're going to have a chance to go up in a world that is welcoming to them. It's really about whether or not their kids and grandchildren are going to have a chance in life. That's what it's about. I don't know if you've been following the news lately. Anybody here ever been to England? Anybody ever been to England? A number of people. 2 weeks ago, England was a place, most places didn't have air conditioning in England. It was 105 degrees. And the day that it was 105 degrees in England, over in the next country over in France, they're getting ready to have their big bicycle race. They had to water tens of thousands of gallons of water to water the road so it wouldn't melt, so they could have the Tour de France. My little state of Delaware, home of Chris Koontz, Joe Biden, myself, Lisa Blunt Rochester, my state is sinking. Sea level rise, seas are rising, our state is sinking. Down in Louisiana, we don't have anybody here ever been to Louisiana? Anybody ever been to New Orleans? Louisiana, They lose a piece of land from sea level rise every 100 minutes, the size of a football field. In the time that you're going to be out here today, they'll lose about two football fields. In the whole duration of today, they'll lose about 12 football fields. The number of farms that are wiped out across this country because of lack of water, because of excessive heat, probably the worst we've ever seen in our lifetimes. Do you have anybody here who likes music? Anybody ever hear these words before? Something's happening here. Just what it is ain't exactly clear. Let's say it again. Something's happening here. Just what it is ain't exactly clear. Whose words were those? Stephen Stills, Buffalo Springfield. Yeah, well, that's exactly clear what's going on here. There's way too much carbon in the air. Way too much carbon in the air. And at the end of the day, it's going to kill us. Not right away. Kind of like the story about the frog that's in a big kettle. They turn on the heat, and eventually the frog dies. But that's the kind of situation that we face. It doesn't have to be that way. And this is not one of the, like, eat your broccoli deals. It doesn't have to be that way. We can actually address climate change. We can cool things down. We can slow it up and make sure that we create a lot of jobs and economic opportunity. I'll give you one example and I'll stop. When I was the age of some of you, I was a naval flight officer in the Vietnam War, and we had a great concern about something that was going on our planet. There's a hole in the ozone. There's a hole, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And folks tried to figure out what's causing that. And they finally figured out it's some of the ingredients that we have in air conditioners, freezers, coolants, that was actually causing that. So they developed, science came along, they developed a new substance to put in the air conditioners and refrigerators and freezers. And guess what? The hole in the ozone went away. That's great. The thing that wasn't so great is that what they used, HFC's hydrofluorocarbon, what they used as a replacement is many, many, many times worse than carbon dioxide on global warming. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, we have a follow-on product to take the place of HFCs. That's good. The other thing that's good, it's manufactured in this country. The other thing that's good about it, it'll create tens of thousands of jobs and give us economic opportunities we didn't otherwise have. And the other thing that's good is we're going to have a chance to vote on that in just a couple of weeks, right in here in the United States Senate on a treaty called Kigali. Let me hear you say Kigali. Let me hear you say Kigali. One more time, really, really. Kigali. There you go. Good golly, Kigali. It's worth 1.5 degrees Celsius. 1.5 degrees Celsius. And others have been talking about, as they should, about the reconciliation package and all the good stuff that it has with respect to climate and our Earth. Kigali's coming too. It'll be a 1-2 punch. Hopefully, we'll take the first punch here this weekend, and then when we come back after August recess, we'll do Kigali as well. Help is on the way. Thank you for being the wind beneath our wings. Thank you. God bless you. Thanks so much. Stay cool.
Senator Van Hollen from the great state of Maryland.
Chris Van Hollen. Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you,
Our
Tom.
man. Chris
Thank
and
you,
I have
Tom.
both had COVID, right?
I've ducked it so far. If you got it, I'm
no,
good.
No. We both lived to tell
Our
about
family
it.
did. But
Right.
thank you, Tom Carper, for your leadership on the Environment and Public Works Committee. And thank you to this great coalition, the League of Conservation Voters, and everybody represented here and everybody gathered here, because it shows that when you stick with it, when you don't give up, when you persevere and you persist, you can get a major step closer toward addressing the challenge of climate change over the finish line. We've got a couple days to do it. I just came from presiding over the Senate. We're going to be coming back here on Saturday, likely, to begin the reconciliation bill. We're going to need everybody in full gear during this period of time to make sure that we get the votes, whether it's late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, get this over the finish line. We've got to get this done. And we all know this has been a roller coaster ride. But the reason we're here is because people all over the country who on days like today could see the impact of climate change and want to do something about it, to save their communities, to save our country, and to save the planet. And That's what this bill does, a major step forward toward reducing those pollutants and greenhouse gases so that we have a chance to make sure that we save the planet. And in doing so, in addressing the harm, there are going to be great opportunities. I'm going to give one example. In the state of Maryland, because of offshore wind, we expect 10,000 new good-paying jobs. The Deputy Secretary of Commerce was in Baltimore yesterday to announce a major federal grant for apprenticeship programs to help train the men and women who are going to be working on those offshore wind turbines and fabricating them and running them. And so we have a great story to tell in terms of the opportunity if we accelerate the deployment of clean energy. That's what this bill is all about. Some of us were here in 2009. I see a lot of faces from 2009. I'm sure Ed Markey was probably here when we passed legislation out of the House of Representatives. It's been too long to wait to get another major bill, but it is better late than never, because never would be doomed for all of us. So here we are. My main message is thank you all for getting us to this point, but we've got at least 3 or 4 days to go before the final vote. So don't let off the steam. Keep at it. And of course, this is one major step, but only one step toward our ultimate goal. So thank you all very much. It's been an exciting time, all made possible by people throughout the country who want to make sure we have a better planet, a more livable planet for everybody. Thanks, and take care.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Dock. I'm the chair of Protect Our Care. And oftentimes at the end of programs, people say that they're the last person between themselves and lunch. Patrick and I know that we're the last people between you and air conditioning, so we're going to be really brief. Protect Our Care is an organization that was founded in late 2016 to stop Donald Trump from doing away with the Affordable Care Act. And to be honest, we thought we'd lose. But then what happened is that the Voice of America stood up. They took over town halls and spoke in favor of health care. And lo and behold, in this building, late one night, we held on to the Affordable Care Act. And since then, it's been still under attack. But over the next few days, we have the opportunity to move health care forward in America in a way we never could before. And that's a huge step for millions of Americans. I should say, as a sidebar, I'm also on the board of the Environmental Defense Fund, so I'm pretty happy about the rest of the bill, too. So in a few days, we now know that the Senate will start voting, and I think we all believe, but we all certainly hope, that we will pass the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. We will dramatically reduce the cost of prescription drugs for millions of people. We will lower the out-of-pocket caps for millions of seniors. We will stop the pharmaceutical companies from being able to just make one egregious price hike after another for the same drug just because they can. We'll reduce Medicare premiums for tens of millions of Medicare recipients, and we will make insulin affordable for everyone. These changes are desperately needed, particularly at a time when Americans who are working so hard are grappling with higher prices. And finally, this bill will also reduce the cost of health insurance. Without the measures in this bill, it's anticipated that 3 million people could no longer afford their insurance, and 13 million more would pay far higher premiums. This bill will save, on average, American families over $2,000 a year just on their health care premiums. As people have said, this legislation is incredibly popular. And in the health care provision and climate, both popular no matter where you live and what party you belong to. And that's because these are issues that affect people in their daily lives. This is also a victory over the special interests. On the healthcare side, pharma has spent over $140 million just to defeat this bill. And they're spending more of that money every single day between now and when this vote occurs. And it's a victory that we will get despite the fact that every single Republican will vote against it. There is no starker contrast, no starker accountability than the vote that's going to be taken later this week. This bill is going to land like a bouquet of flowers on all of the kitchen tables in America. We all know, all of us know, what happens when you're sick and how it takes over your life. Imagine what happens when you're sick and you can't afford the drugs you need to live, when you have to sit there and cut your pills in half after you left the doctor and they told you that was the worst thing you could possibly do. Imagine sitting there and knowing that you have a lump somewhere, but you can't afford to go to the doctor, so you can't do anything about it, and it grows inside your body as you wait. That's the reality of millions of Americans, and that's the reality that we can change, and these senators will change in just a few days. This bill is going to make a real difference in the lives of real people. People who work hard every day, but as I said, can't afford the drugs they need to stay alive. People who work hard every day, but can't afford the health insurance and die way before their time because they couldn't afford to see a doctor. These are real things we can change, real things that will make a difference. So I want to close by thanking everybody who's put their time, their elbow grease, and their hearts on the provisions, both in climate and in healthcare, and to all the senators who are going to get this through for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Gaspard, and I'm the president of the Center for American Progress. I get to bring up the rear here, and I get to say there ain't nothing to it but to now do it. If you think that it's hot now, it's going to get turned up significantly these next few days because Senate Democrats are cooking with grease, and they're clear about who they're centering in their fight and on whose behalf they're here voting the next few days. Inflation is a scourge across the country right now. We have whole swaths of Kentucky falling into the sea. We have a fire that's being scorched in California that's 1.5 times the size of the city of Washington, D.C. And we have seniors that are on fixed incomes that are making tough decisions because we don't have the reform that we need in Medicare. All that is coming, all that's being delivered now, and we're about to have the largest investment that we've ever had in the history in this country in climate action because climate can't wait. So we're going to move and we're going to act now. So while MAGA extremist Republicans are banning books, while they're lifting up bigotry, while MAGA extremist Republicans are looking for ways to defend the gun lobby and to make sure that the richest continue to have the tax breaks that they have enriched themselves, Democrats are going to be fighting on behalf of young people who understand the crisis in climate. They're going to be working for those seniors to close the cost of prescription drugs, and they're going to make sure that every single American understands what's at stake and what's available to them in this democracy if we act together and we act now. So let's get going. Let's pass this bill. Let's address these crises. Let's make sure that all of us keep our hands on the plow these next few days, keep our eyes and our gaze on the North Star, and let's show all Americans exactly who wins if you elect Democrats up and down the ballot. Thank you.